Hey there, and welcome everybody to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. Hey, Zoe.
Hey, Michael. How's it going?
It's good. I'm still riding the wave of yesterday's full moon. What are the dates for this week? Let's get them exact.
Monday the 10th through Sunday the 16th.
So we are halfway through the lunar cycle because of yesterday's full moon in Aries. So we talked a lot about this full moon in last week's podcast, but let's just sort of do a little kind of review because we're still fully in the full moon energy today on Monday. This entire lunar cycle is all about our relationships. Libra is the sign that invented the idea that we connect outside of ourselves to understand who we are through relating, through the mirror consciousness. And Libra invented that. So the full moon in Aries was one where we were and still are, because we're still in that energy, letting go of things that inhibit a more true, organic, authentic, and powerful connection with others. And in the world of relationship, always what's going to inhibit that is wounds of the heart. The wounds that say, I want love, but I don't feel like I deserve it. Like there's almost no relationship challenge that doesn't ultimately fall into that paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
I want love, but I'm not sure in my heart if I deserve it, if I feel deserving of it. And so this full moon was almost perfectly designed for that confrontation. The sun and Venus are conjunct. That means our conscious awareness is fully shining its light on our heart centers, telling us just how open the landscape is, because that's what happens when the light of consciousness and the planet of love get near each other. And then on the other side of the solar system, where the moon was yesterday, in the sign of Aries, 3 degrees away from Chiron, the great healer. Chiron is in the sign of Aries, which is all about fire and combustion, which means our healings are intense. With Chiron in the fiery mansion of Mars-ruled Aries, the healing experiences that we have are not gentle, they're not subtle, and they're, they can be pretty fired up. And so this full moon has the potential to be a little bit fired up with some intensity in the direction of burning off wounds so that we can show up to love more openly, more courageously, and most importantly, with a greater sense of deserving. If you're listening to all of this and this is speaking to you particularly powerfully at this time, understand that the benefit of this release is not something that is going to necessarily be immediate. Right? We've still got Mercury and his retrograde movement to talk about, which is going to be a big part of today's podcast in a few minutes. He still has to go through all of his process of the retrograde shadow and moving about the cosmos after the retrograde. And because he will be in the sign of Libra, which is where the sun and Venus are, the release that we're in with this full moon may not show up in our hearts for a while, both because of Mercury's retrograde and Mars's, right? We're still in the shadow of Mars moving around, collecting experience that we're going to be revisiting on a psychic way, in a psychic way during November and December when he turns around. And then we've got all of January, February, March for him to wrap up his movement. All of this to say that the things we're releasing now that are opening up our hearts to receive more love may not show up as more love for a couple of months. Trust the process, kids. So, speaking of love, relationships, and Mercury, today Mercury enters Libra. So this is where the Mercury retrograde started out. Mercury started out in Libra and moved backward into Virgo. So in this third act wrap-up, him returning to Libra is really key. And here's why. If we anthropomorphize the movement of Mercury, and Mercury is the planet of our perceptions, when Mercury moves into Libra, anytime Mercury moves into Libra, we are in a position to perceive how we are looking outside of ourselves and seeing love or not seeing love. Like we've been talking a lot about this month that because Libra rules this mirrored consciousness, you cannot have anything in your experience unless it's inside of you first.
Right. Right.
And Mercury is the planet through which we see what's inside of us and look out to see it reflected. I mean, that is what Mercury does.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like this, and I think I even said this in last week's podcast. If Mercury moved into Libra a few weeks ago and said, here I am in the most loving environment, and it's just not feeling as loving as it needs to, I think I'll turn around and go back into Virgo, where the healing is, where the process is, where the integration happens, where I put everything in its place. So Mercury was like, we don't have enough love in our perception. I'm going to turn around and help all of us rewire how we're perceiving our lives so that we can see things through the lens of the love that's in our hearts. So Mercury re-entering Libra is going to disseminate everything we learned about perceiving our lives with greater love, driving our experiences. And in some ways, it starts today in deeper earnest because today's the day that Mercury returns to the sign of Libra.
Does this mean we're all having revelations this week? Or
you know, this weekend or next week, both.
Okay.
That actually brings up, I'd love that you asked that, so because it actually speaks to a little addendum that I want to throw in here. Because really, for my money as an astrologer, and because I'm also A, psychologist, and B, someone who's never left the path of self-investigation, healing, and self-actualization, that really, yes, this whole time is about receiving insights around how we give and receive love based on the healing experiences that we've all been going through. And so Chiron has been so prominent in this lunar cycle and this month in ways that are ultimately really subtle and not overt astrologically, but they're in there.
Mm-hmm.
So as of this podcast, the sun has already opposed Chiron. But just like 2 days before the new moon on Sunday, the sun opposed Chiron, bringing our conscious awareness to the process of looking at wounds.
Mm-hmm.
Today, Venus has moved just enough since yesterday's full moon to perfect her opposition with Chiron. So this full moon has a deep healing mechanism built into it. Some of us are experiencing this as an uplifting opening that allows more love to fill in the wounded spaces. And we might be, I'm having this experience, feeling a kind of flood of love. But it's a psychic surgery, full moon, kids, so not everybody is feeling that. Some of us are feeling the wound being removed as a painful making of an opening in the heart that we will fill with more love as we move and grow through the rest of this lunar cycle. So not everybody's having a yay, happy experience of this, but the mechanism is beautiful. And with Mercury moving back into Libra, Mercury will oppose Chiron around the 19th of October. And that fits to what you asked me that sparked this little segment, right? that is perhaps an awareness moment, an aha moment directly connected to some stuff that right now might feel like something's happening in a healing way, but you might not be able to perceive it with some accuracy. By the time Mercury does, in fact, oppose Chiron on October 19th, not only will that opposition itself yield some awarenesses and perception changes, Mercury will also be fully out of his retrograde cycle at that point in the free and clear portion. So we really will be having perceptions about how we give and receive love in a few weeks based on the healings that we're moving through right now. It's all about Mercury this week. So staying with that, we are in the final big wrap-up of the triple transit kerfuffle that was the biggest challenge of this Mercury retrograde cycle. So he's now moving direct, but he has to tap out on all of those triple transits a third and final time. And there's a grouping of 3 that all happen either in consecutive days or on the same day or close enough that in every section of the retrograde cycle, including this week, this big energetic splash hit. And once I describe it to you, you guys will be like, oh, yeah, that was the shit show of the Mercury retrograde cycle. So let me break down the transits as individual hits, and then I'll talk about what they might have generated by, putting them together. Mercury in an opposition to Pluto is like a perception confrontation with shadow. It's a fight waiting to happen. It's an integration waiting to happen, perhaps, mind of perception interacting with the Lord of the Underworld. We want that, right? We want to be comfortable perceiving the shadow and the darker qualities of our human experience because that's partly how we grow and learn and heal. But an opposition is a hard geometry and it forces things to happen, and we're not in control of whether what they do is like dance or crash. So now, especially with Mercury in Libra opposing Pluto, because Libra's all about peace and harmony. Pluto's all about the shit that fucks with peace and harmony, because Pluto's like all of the gravitas and the intensity of life. And Libra doesn't always know how to be with that dark stuff without over-accommodating, keeping it peaceful, or spiritually bypassing it. So an opposition between Mercury and Pluto is a guarantee of bumping into shadow, but even more so because Mercury is in a sign that has a tendency to want to skirt above the darker qualities. Mm-hmm. Why this is important to mention is because hopefully in this third and final iteration of this confrontation, that people might have bumped into passive aggression or sideways ways of handling what they wanted to say, way back in late August, early September when this all started, that by now people who are working with these Mercury principles are having the experience of being willing to speak into darker feelings without over-accommodating. Mm-hmm. Like I had an experience just the other day where I was angry with someone, a friend, who did something that was worthy of being angry about, and I said something truthfully and gently about it. And he got it. He took it in, he heard it. That's not the interesting part. What's interesting is when it was over, I didn't feel the need to make it okay for him.
Taking out the people-pleasing aspect of conflict.
That's right. If he's a little stung that I'm a little mad, so that's his freaking problem. I have a lifetime of making that okay for people and then suffering because I feel like I give myself away in that paradigm, right? So I don't really do this much anymore in my life, but this is what I'm talking about. I don't do this as much because I've worked hard at it. And so when I was able to actually not do the little follow-up way in which I might make it okay, which in the past I would have said, oh, well, that's not really selling myself out. It's like, yeah, any need to keep the peace is selling myself out. This isn't going to be everybody's story, but certainly archetypally, all of us are going to be more prone to not being authentically powerful with our voices when Mercury is opposing Pluto, especially with the Mercury being in Libra. And so that's a dynamic that's part of this week and the points in the past that I'm going to also ask you guys to look back at. But that's only one of the transits. There's two others. And this is what made this Mercury retrograde so flippin' difficult, which is a sesqui square from Mercury to both Saturn and Uranus. So let's break these two down separately. Mercury in 135-degree agitation with Uranus is actually kind of exciting. Mercury and Uranus are related through mentality and intellect. Mercury is intellect in the mind. Uranus is the divine mind and higher thought and the internet and electricity and, all of these exciting, innovative energies. That's a Uranus thing. So even though this is an agitated geometry, it's agitation between two planets that dwell in the world of both mentality, intellect, thinking, and intuition and higher thought. Mm-hmm. But it's not a smooth moment when the geometry is this agitation. Mercury in the same geometry with Saturn, now that's a lot of frustration and bother. That's delays and breakdowns and frustrations. But when Saturn creates a breakdown, a delay, or a frustration with big geometry, that's a lesson. That's a pay attention to this, you're learning something. Saturn,
the great teacher, right?
That's right.
Yes.
But this is not a major angle. This is an agitated, loose, weak angle. And all it can really generate from Saturn is that energy of delay, breakdown, or challenge without it necessarily being like a, stop, you're going to learn something. It's more like, stop because I can. Stop because I can delay you.
Mm-hmm. The learning process.
That's right. The lesson might be tiny or quick or slippery in this kind of geometry. But now Saturn and Uranus are squaring each other. That means lessons and teachings are in conflict with awakenings and seeing things more clearly. Both planets want us to be operating more powerfully. But Saturn wants it through growth that's personal, and Uranus wants us through inspiration and connection to higher thought that's interventional or divine inspiration kind of thing. But in a conflict of a square, we are learning and growing and waking up to higher levels of consciousness and awareness, but through conflict. Mm-hmm. And this energy was prominent last year. It's looser this year, but every which way we turn, that square is being activated by different transits, full moons, and in this case, Mercury retrograde. So Mercury retrograde agitating, here's where I'm putting it all together, right? Mercury retrograde agitating Uranus so that inspired thoughts will get into the mix, kind of like the action of like a piece of stone on a flint, right? Where you click, chick, 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 and then a spark happens and something, a fire might light. That's Uranus and Mercury in a sesqui square. But if at the same time there's that friction with Saturn, it's like, yeah, but there's a lesson. It's going to be through delay. It's not going to be clean. You're going to be bumping into conflict with your mind and needing to process something, looking for clarity when clarity is not what's available. And then you throw into all of this the deep shadow confrontation of Mercury opposing Pluto. And now you got a bit of a shit show of agitation, shadow, confrontation, the possibility of conflict, and all sorts of free-floating frustration, anxiety, and bother.
I'm making like a frowny face right now because that just sounds... Like, why does it have to be hard?
Listen, I won't.
Why do we have to do it this way?
Right. Let me add a couple of things to take the frowny face away, at least a little bit. Number one, this is the direct shadow. This is the lightest, breeziest, easiest part of these triple transits. The description I gave you was for the and I did it on purpose. I was dramatic and intense with my language on purpose. But understand the really bumpy passage of this was like August 29th through September 2nd. The very end of August, these three transits hit. Boom, boom, boom. And they hit for the first time. And that would have been some shit show experience, right? It would have been even harder to bump into these energies when they hit while Mercury was backwards. And for that, I would encourage you to look back to around the 18th and 19th of September, because that's when these three transits all punched us while Mercury was backwards. This third and final pass, though, is the wrap-up. It can't be as difficult as the first or the second. And it's very likely, and the reason why I give these dates is it's very likely that if this week is going to trip you up in a big way, it's going to be because themes are rising up that connect back to mid-September and late August. And if that's not your story, because that ain't going to be everybody's story, if that's not your story, then it's just going to be a potentially shitty week in the realm of communication, where tomorrow, Tuesday, you're more likely to have a fight and bump into shadow. And then Wednesday, you're more likely to have innovative, interesting ideas that spark and inspire you, but they might also lead to delays and breakdowns on Thursday as opposed to smooth movement, right? It's not as bad as it sounds when I just give you the energy of the transits. It all kind of softens up when you realize it's just the end of a process that we've been in since mid-August.
I wonder if listeners want to comment what they've learned through this Mercury retrograde or what's clicking.
I would love that. So if you, if you check in with this podcast on YouTube, where you can easily comment, do that, or go to Instagram where we promote it on the post. Love to hear what people are going through relationally and mercurially. So we've got 2 more weeks of this lunar cycle to go. It is definitely smoother, even though this week has these Mercury bump ups. It is a much easier landscape energetically than last lunar cycle was. And the next lunar cycle is eclipse season, kids, so it's going to amp up and get a little bit more intense. But for now, we're in an easier couple of weeks in general, and we're still engaged in letting go of things that inhibit a greater experience of love, intimacy, and connection. Have at it, everybody.
All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. This week, we have a call-in dreamer calling from Alberta, Canada. Ziad, how's it going? What you dreaming?
It's going well. I've been dreaming about my brother, actually. He's always been very close in my life, a younger brother, 2.5 years younger, and I am 29. And his name is Ari, and I've always felt this kind of need to kind of look over him, guide him, protect him. And
Got it. So you're the typical, you're the
I'm
big
the
brother.
big brother.
Air quotes.
Exactly.
All right.
And so this dream was one of my many fears that something would happen to him. And this dream was like something that had to do with like a physical occurrence. And he actually lost a tooth. And I actually kind of blamed myself, and I thought I was supposed to look over him, and I should have
So hang on
been.
a second, Z. He lost a tooth. This is the dream now we're talking
This is
about?
the
In the
dream.
dream? This is the dream. Got it. So he loses a tooth.
And so he lost this tooth, who knows how. And I kind of put on myself that I
Uh-huh.
should have been there to have prevented that from happening. And this whole dream going on, this kind of anxiety, this trying to come to terms with him having lost a tooth, something that might not
Mm.
have been fixable, something he would have to live with. And yes, that was the extent of the dream for the most part. And then I woke up and I was just like, yes, this is not real life.
Well, let me ask you a little bit about real life. Let's go back a bunch of years. So
Yes,
take me
please.
back into childhood. What was the actual waking life dynamic between you guys within the family environment and within like real life time, waking up time? How was it that you were his caretaker or you took that on? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Like he has always had this kind of thing, asthma, and there'd be times when he would have to wake up in the middle of the night and we'd have to take him to the hospital.
Hospital. Yeah, 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 yeah.
He'd have to get help breathing, and eventually he took on an inhaler and he was able to kind of manage that. So, kind of waking up from sleep
Yes.
to that was often a fear in childhood. And then it kind of just became the norm, especially as we were able to accommodate.
Right, accommodate and respond and adapt.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. But like this is a real thing, Z, and you obviously know this. I have a nephew who had childhood asthma, and so I know this story as well, where that kind of asthma is in fact deadly.
Huh.
Like, well, you go to the hospital because you might die. That's what's happening, right? That's a very literal and real legitimized fear. And even the idea that your story of it, like when we ask you to tell
Mhm.
the story, you go straight to being woken up in the middle of the night. What I'm guessing that there might have been times where Ari's asthma might have played a part, you know, during the day, right? It
Right.
wasn't specifically a nighttime thing, but it's living in your memory as this highly charged, chaotic, sudden awareness of danger
Yes.
that you had to respond
Very
to.
much so.
So remember, this is your now years later, your adult dream is not about Ari. It's not about his tooth, even. It's about you and a pattern that lives
Hmm.
inside of you that got woken up by a kind of caretaker mentality that you got initiated in as a child in a very real sort of circumstance where there was danger and you felt a kind of brotherly caretaking.
Mhm.
How does this pattern play out in your adult life having nothing to do with your brother?
That is a good question. I think it's actually manifested in certain
Yes.
relationships I have. It could be
Okay.
platonic
That's right.
relationships, could be intimate relationships. In that, it's this kind of desire to care for, to, kind of prevent anything negative from happening in one's life, one who is close to me, one who I may be getting closer with. It kind of becomes
Yeah.
this almost like a power dynamic in that I feel like I have to kind
Mhm.
of have this leverage in which to intervene and maybe even
Ooh,
protect
Z, I'm
one.
loving these awarenesses of the sort of shadow side of being a caretaker, being a rescuer, being a hero.
Yeah.
I hear hero in there a lot, right? Right? And so there's a currency
Mhm.
that your small places inside you might
Definitely.
have of like, okay, if I can be the hero, if I can caretake, if I can be the one who brings in the life-saving solution, that's my currency. I will feel better about my relationships by bringing that. And of course, these are lovely qualities, Z, right? That we don't want to throw the baby out with the
Hmm.
bathwater, but the dream is maybe showing you some of the impact of this pattern sort of rising up, in a way that needs your attention. In other words, your caretaking impulses, we don't have to worry about. Like they're built in.
Hmm.
What we might have to be concerned with is where are you overgiving? Where are you valuing that over an intimate connection with others, which allows for, vulnerability on both sides.
Huh. I'd be curious to learn more.
Okay. Let's ask a little bit about this tooth in the dream. Is there any information about the tooth itself? Like, is it an upper? Was it a lower? Was there awareness of what tooth your brother lost? Or was it just a general thing of he lost a tooth?
Yeah, it was an upper tooth, like one of the front
That's
teeth.
interesting to me. Because what do we do with our teeth that connects to love? We reveal our teeth to others in a smile in order to attract people, to bring them toward us. So the idea of your brother losing a tooth that's right up front, that's right in the kind of sight line of other people seeing, if he should reveal them in a smile, then that tooth becomes access to being able to attract love. And so then buried in that is like a message for you, which is, am I lovable if I'm not taking care of somebody? Am
Huh.
I lovable if I'm not the hero? Am I lovable if I can't attract you with my charm and my winningness? Will you come towards me even when I'm a little broken or not quite operating at full tilt?
Huh.
Because remember, again, it's not about your brother anymore. It's about your patterning of here's what I need to feel like I'm a valuable human being to others is I caretake, I help, I'm the hero. And so the dream gives us, if nothing else, it gives us an opportunity to have this conversation where one of the things you say when I hold up the mirror about what this dream is speaking to me, you say, that's curious, tell me more, which is what I like. Like sometimes on this podcast, see, someone will come on and the answer is in the conversation right here in the dream. But in some ways, what's juiciest to me about you and I talking today isn't about this conversation and what my listeners are going to hear, but about what you're going to be thinking about for the next 24, 48 hours after this conversation, as you start to think about, what about what Dr. Michael said is accurate? How am I noticing that there are patterns in how I relate that actually reflect a level of not security, but actually insecurity? Where we find these things that the world will tell us this is how we're valuable to others, and then we overemphasize those things because we think, well, that's what's going to attract love.
Wow. And so love, I'd be curious to know how in this conversation we're conceiving of love. Is it an abstract love? Is it
Oh, I
plutonic?
love that you're asking the question. Well, I'll tell you how it sort of works for me. It's like it starts with I'm simply listening to the dream. And so I'll grab an image in the dream that strikes me, right? And that includes coming from this conversation from just decades of understanding symbolic meaning and things that are standard, right? That we understand in the field of psychology. And so I go with the literality of the missing tooth. I don't know if you're going to have an answer for me when I ask the question, what tooth? But I think there might be information. And so you give it to me. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. What then will I make a symbolic association with a front tooth? And I go straight to the smile. Why do we smile? We smile so that other people will smile back. It's a magnetized experience out in the world that allows a person to spin their energy in their face that shows up as a smile that then makes other people do the same in response. So smiling is one of the first points of intimacy and connection between human beings. And then when I asked you a question, a kind of general question about you, and you kind of responded about platonic relationships and other relationships. So now I know that is, in fact, on your mind and in your heart. And so now I'm putting together my thoughts about the smile, the things that I then say for my storehouse of symbolic wisdom, the one or two things that you then add when I ask a question or two, and you're thinking about how you relate to others. And bam, the meaning becomes clear to me because I'm putting all of these things together like piece by piece by piece. And then I offer it, and it's like, then it becomes something that either you resonate with or you don't resonate with. And that's sort of how dream interpretation works.
Very interesting. I'd be interested to kind of have that self-reflection moving forward. How is it that I'm
Beautiful.
kind of
Beautiful.
interacting
So,
with others?
right.
Is there a kind of ego involved? Is there some sort of space of transcendence where I'm able to kind of go past those mental limitations, just kind of be in the moment?
Beautiful. What I just heard you asking is, well, what do I do with this? What do I do with this dream image? What do I do now that you've offered me this way of looking at it? What do I do next? This moment clearly wants you to be in deeper consideration of what you bring to
Mhm.
intimacy, what you bring that is coming from insecurity and an overgiving sense of
Ah,
not trusting that your love will come to you just by showing up, which is a lesson that many of us have to. I identify with this completely.
Guilty.
I have been an overgiver my whole life.
ah.
Now, I'm also generous, right? It's in my nature to give and be generous. I don't want to get rid of that, but I do want to make sure that when I'm giving in a high stakes, intimate experience, that I'm giving from a true and grounded place in my heart and not from a place where I don't feel like I deserve the love unless I'm giving you the best smile I've got. I
Hmm.
want you to love me even when I'm frowning or my tooth is broken.
Beautiful. Wow. Very metaphorical, too. I really like that.
Yay. Thank you, Z. Appreciate you coming in.
Of course. Thank you. And thank you to Zoe.
That was kind of apt, like thinking about interpersonal relationships. That's very of the astrology this month, right?
Oh, absolutely. We just talked about it. Like, hello, yes. It's this whole lunar cycle is all about that.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's just nice hearing other people processing what I'm also processing? Not that that's everything that I'm processing right now. It's not like the
No,
deepest,
but I
but
mean, one of the things, one of the things you're getting to, experience in being the co-host of this podcast with me is that, like, this is what it is to do the kind of work
mm,
that I do. We're always attracting what we're working on simultaneously. It's sort of one of the joys of being of service in this way, because I'm always in process. Because what people, who come towards me are working on is always a reflection of something that's going on with me.
since that was such a short dream, actually, I wanted to share another little dream that was emailed in that has to do with teeth. I also find the teeth, I don't know, kind of spooky. It's October.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I don't know if this is true generationally for all people, but when I was in my mid 20s to my early 30s, I had the recurring dream of losing my teeth,
Mm.
and it then went away. And I think it is a fundamental dream that's more likely to hit somebody in their younger years because it relates to, certain levels of insecurity. But let's hear it. Let's hear the dream.
All right. So Beryl writes in, I'm at a restaurant. I don't know what to order. The server suggests vegetables and a baked potato. I go with that. Then she applies impression material to my teeth. I wait for my order and for her to return and take the impression material off my teeth. She never comes back, so I take the impression material off my teeth. Most of the impressions are good, but one section of my mouth, the teeth are very, very small, and the impression is just mush. I don't recall the server ever returning with the food or to remove that material. That's the end.
Oh my God. I love this dream. I love this dream. This is very much about teeth as connecting to sustenance and self-care and nurturance. And Z's dream was about teeth and attracting love. And this is what I say, if this is not the standard teeth falling out dream, but the standard teeth falling out dreams interpretation is threefold: that we lose the capacity to sustain and nurture ourselves, the chewing and the eating piece,
Mhm.
attracting love, therefore the love piece, and then the protection through snarling, which we don't colloquially, we smile to attract love. We're not out there snarling, but we still have the capacity to go "Arr," as a way of protecting self, right? So, yeah, right. So This dream we know is about sustenance, nurturance, and self-care because we're in a restaurant. We're in a location that says this dream is about how well you are caring for yourself. So the first piece of don't know what to order, we have to acknowledge that there is some element that Beryl is expressing here that says there's difficulty in knowing how, knowing what aspects of care for self are needed at this moment. I don't know what to order. And what winds up being ordered is very nutritionally sound. Vegetables and a little starch, a little carbs for energy and veggies for nutrition. So then the dream is telling us in this place of Beryl in consideration of how she cares for self, we move from I don't know what to do to I'm going to make a very high level of choice. So that's a good snapshot of where Beryl is at this point in her life right now, because this is what she's eating right now. So the symbolic representation is, here's how I'm caring for self and feeding myself. Even when I don't always know what to do, I'm making good choices, decent enough choices. The impressions of the teeth, to me, are reminding me of the past, especially because one section of the teeth that she sees in the impression are small. She says specifically small. And therefore the impression is mushy. That suggests to me younger teeth. Smaller teeth or younger teeth. So if there's a part of her mouth that is small and can't be powerful, there's a part of herself that can't quite take a bite out of life.
Interesting.
The first part of the dream says self-care is doing pretty good. But in examining the past, we see that in the patterning in the teeth, in the patterning of self-care and sustenance and nurturance, there's still one small part of the mouth that is reflecting a lower level of maturity, power, integration, and, solid selfhood. Which, of course, is what we're all looking for, right? We're all looking, even like with Z, that hopefully what we presented to Z was an opportunity for him to see a blind spot he might have missed had he not had this dream and the conversation that we had.
Yeah.
That he can go into his new intimate experiences that he cultivates in the future and be more thoughtful about, am I overgiving? Am I trusting that I deserve? And similarly, with Beryl's dream, it's like we're in good shape with sustenance and self-care, but there is still some area where we're playing small, where we're not quite gripping life or biting life or able to chew on and sustain ourselves in a big way. And this is important to... I was going to say, let me finish that sentence. This is important for us to have these awarenesses of where our blind spots are. This dream doesn't exactly give us clarity about that, but it does say that in some portion of Beryl's consciousness, there's something that needs attention around taking more in, sustaining more, biting life more powerfully, more passionately, and more fully.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.